Okay, guys, good morning. How you guys doing? Hopefully good. We have 2.5 minutes pretty much. Then we can get the meeting going. Hope you all had a nice couple days since Monday, and just get comfortable, and yeah, we'll get started in a few. Hey, Steven. Hey, Ryan. All right. Kylie, hey there. Nina, welcome back. Are you guys having finals during finals week for your other classes too? I wonder what your professors are doing and stuff like that. I just try to stick to the format that they give us, but I know sometimes professors assign papers, or maybe they ask you to do something before finals week or something like that. Hey, Grant. Okay, so Stephen, you say yes. You have some other finals next week too. So a lot of studying going on. It's a busy time of the year, but it's also exciting knowing that you're getting to the summer. I don't know if you guys have summer plans, summer school, just hanging out at home, or maybe some of you are vaccinated, going to take a chance on traveling or doing something. Hey, Brian, welcome back. Yeah, I don't have any summer plans myself. I'm just going to take it very easy. It's been a busy spring, so I'm going to relax for a few months. Hey, Marin. Everybody else, good to see you guys. Jian Yen, hey there. Okay, so now that we're getting right to 9 a.m., I'll let things get underway. Welcome back, everybody. Hope you're having a good morning. And today it's Wednesday, May 12th. We have only 2 live streams left, today and Friday. And the whole point of these 2 meetings is to just go through the notes in the study guide for the final exam. So I mailed you the study guide on May the 6th through Canvas. So I would ask you right now, since this is the first installment of the 2-part review session, to pull up your copy of that study guide if you don't already have it pulled up. You would simply be able to go into either your emails or to our Canvas page, click on the announcements tab, and find the most recent announcement, or one of them anyway, which talks about the final exam study guide. And that's what we're going to use to sort of guide our review session today and on Thursday. And good to see everybody showing up. Welcome back. So if you look at the list itself, what you will see is that there's 43 questions on page 1, and those are all from before the midterm. And then there's 43 other questions on page 2, which are from post-midterm. And it's a cumulative test, but I will ask more questions from the second half than the first. When you took your midterm, you were limited to a 1-hour window of time, just a regular class period. And let's see, is somebody coming in here? Thought I heard a door, but anyway, if I do, then I'll slap the mask on. But yeah, what I was saying is, for the midterm, you only had 1 hour. So I only asked you to answer 6 out of 10 questions. But for the final, you get 2.5 hours. And so because you have that extra time, I'll ask a few more questions, not like a ton more, but maybe you'll have to answer like 8 or something instead of 6. And maybe instead of giving you the option to eliminate 4, it could be like 8 out of 12, 8 out of 11, or something like that. And since I'm going to try and emphasize the second half of the study guide, there'll be more than half of the questions that come from that second half. So if I was to decide on like 12 questions, maybe it would be a breakdown of like 8 and 4, like 2/3 from the second half, 1/3 from the first half, something along those lines. So anyway, that's just to give you a sense of how the final exam will look. Questions that are on the study guide will just appear on the test, and I'll just create a question bank and then you'll have to select, like 7 or 8 of those questions to report on for your final answers. And hey, Dimitri, Eric, Noah, everybody, Claire, good to see you guys. So since it's a review session, all I want you to do is to ask me questions and stuff, hey there, about the material that's on the study guide. So whenever you're ready, you'll be able to ask these questions, and I and your other classmates will help guide you through some good information for response. But as before with the midterm review session, I think I said then that I do prefer for these review session meetings to be kind of more student-driven and student-led. So I like it better when the students are trying their best to help each other to provide the right content for the information on the answers. But I'll insert myself as necessary whenever I think I have to clarify something, expand on something, repeat or correct anything, or bring us onto the right track if I think there's something that's missing. So other than that, I turn it over to you. I have nothing left to teach you. That's over with. So I hope that you learned something. But now, Stephen, you've got questions. Okay, so you say, can we go over 52 and 62? Yes, let's do that. So I'm looking at the list of study guide questions, which you guys should also pull up. 52 says, describe a possible closed loop of causation involving time travel. All right, Stephen, so you're going with time travel to start. In the article by David Lewis, he gives a scenario, right? Do you remember like David Lewis's article, The Paradoxes of Time Travel? Because that's what this question is taken from the David Lewis piece. He gives a scenario where a person goes into the past, and well, let me tell it a little differently. He gives a scenario where somebody receives a phone call from a mysterious caller. And what is this phone call all about? Do you remember this little hypothetical situation? The phone call that is placed is to inform the person on the phone about what? To tell them something. Go ahead, Stephen. You asked the question, so maybe your memory. Well, he's talking with his past self. Yes, Stephen, but there's 2 cases of talking with the past self that are mentioned by the author. One is just the issue of how many people is it? And if you remember, he says it's 2 temporal parts, but it's just one person because there's a psychological continuity between the later stage and the earlier stage that would be receiving the call. But this is a different case. This is the case of the person that receives a call from a man, woman, whoever, that is telling them how to do something. This phone call that is received informs the person how to do what. They tell them, I want you to do this, do this. What is the thing they say to do? Just think of the scenario, use your memory, your notes, your book, whatever, and tell me, what was this content of the phone call? Not just who was called, but what was talked about in the call. It's a loop. It's a loop thing. It's the loop, scenario. So I'm trying to jog your memory a little bit by giving you hints. So think about it. Let me know what you remember. Person gets a call. They say, hey, listen to me. I need you to do what? Leave it capped off. That's fine. Yeah, so tell me. Or if you can't remember, go into the book, open the pages, look for it, do something, find the information. The information's out there. You need to tell me what it is. See, this is when it helps when you read. If you didn't read and you just took notes, then it doesn't set into your memory. There you go, Stephen. How to build a time machine. All right. So go ahead and walk me through the story, Stephen. The person calls. They say, hey, listen, I need you to build a machine, and here's the instructions. So build this. Person who gets the phone call does build it. Then what happens? So they build this thing based on a phone call they receive. The caller says, don't ask questions, just make something. And this is how you make it. So they do make it. That's not the end of the story. What happens afterwards? You're just saying they build a time machine. There's more. First of all, the person that gets the call, they build a machine based on the instructions. Then, after that, go ahead. Don't let me cut you off. What's the next thing? I'm not going to say it, so you got to type it. Ryan, you remember this thing? Anybody? Who's in this meeting that knows this? Go ahead, tell me. Stephen, were you guessing about how to build a time machine as your suggestion? Because if you knew that, then you would maybe remember the remaining part of the story. Person tells him how to build a machine, and then what happens? It is David Lewis. Yeah, so you tell your past self how to build it. Correct, Noah. After having told this past self how to build it, what does the past self do? They build it. And then they do what? They go back in time later to tell the past self how to do it. So, yeah, there you go. You receive the phone call as like whatever, just a normal phone call. Someone tells you how to build a machine. Years pass. After years pass, you turn it on and you use it to go back to the past to tell yourself how to build a machine. So this is a loop. It's a loop because the question could be asked, where does the information come from in the first place? It seems like it's a mystery that's incomprehensible because the information about how to build a machine came from a phone call received. Then the information was relayed back from the person who places the phone call later in time to themselves. But it seems like the information about the machine itself just kind of comes out of nothing, out of nowhere. And this is claimed as one of the paradoxes of time travel that some think make it appear to be impossible. David Lewis, though, says it's not really impossible. It's just very weird because each link within the story makes sense. It's just that the whole thing is a little bit bizarre. So any scenario like that is a closed loop of causation within time travel. I was thinking about this topic the other day on my own, and okay, I was like, I came up with a scenario that I thought was also like in the same genre. So you want to hear this? A person, like a boy, he's raised by a single mother. He's raised by this single mother, and she has like burns on her face that she suffered earlier in her life, actually prior to giving birth to him. So she's got a disfigured appearance, but she doesn't want him to ever see like photos of her from her youth before the accident because it's like painful, traumatic memories. So I guess she's deleted and removed such photographs. Anyway, she's a great mother. She's a very caring mother, and she takes care of him on her own. When he's growing up, he always asks, "Who is my dad?" And she says to him, "Well, he's just this one guy that I met one time, and we had a brief romance, but I never got to see him again. So that's why I'm, a single parent." So the kid, he's really obsessed with the thought of, who is my dad? I want to know. So he builds a time machine. All right. He goes back to the time when he knows that the mother conceived him so that he can try to like meet his father back in the past. But he can't seem to find him. And when he goes back there, he meets somebody that he kind of falls in love with, and he ends up conceiving a child. But what he doesn't realize is that that woman was actually his mother because he didn't recognize the face since later on in the future she got burned. You following me? Okay, so he has a child with this person as his mother who ends up being him. That's another loop, eh? It's a loop because where did he come from? He came from a person that conceived him who was himself in the past. So, closed loops of causation. That's the kind of question that is raised by the possibilities of these things in science fictional time travel scenarios. Does it make it impossible? You say it sounds like the show Dark? Well, Steven, no spoilers because I'm watching that right now. But anyway, these are the kind of loops and stuff that the question is asking about. All right, so let's go ahead to the next one. And let's pick up the pace, everybody. You got to come prepared. So get these questions answered. Number 62. 62 says, explain Stoljar's distinction between the interpretation and the truth question. Okay, so write out what is the interpretation question and what is the truth question about physicalism. There's two questions mentioned by Daniel Stoljar. What are the two questions? Tell me what they are, and then we'll go from there. While you're writing and thinking, let me say a little last thing about the other one. Lewis says that this incomprehensible like loop scenario is not impossible because it's just as weird as things we already know about the universe. Like, how can this universe exist if it's always been here? Or how can it exist if it came out of nothing? If God has always existed, then how is that possible since he would violate the principle of sufficient reason? Anyway, okay, so now, Stephen, you say Stoljar's two questions each deal with a different aspect about physicalism. One deals with truth, okay, and the other one deals with what it means if physicalism is true. But you didn't even write the question, Stephen. So, Eric, interpretation. What does it mean to say that everything is physical? Eric, is it true that everything is physical? The truth question is that question. Is it true that everything is physical? The interpretation question is the question of what it means to say that everything is physical. He says that you have to first answer the interpretation question before you can proceed to the truth question, because you cannot determine whether a statement is true or false if you do not even know what it means. And in terms of answering the interpretation question, he does say that you have to look at supervenience, because supervenience explains what it means to claim that everything is physical. And for the truth question, he offered those two arguments, the methodological naturalism and the causal closure argument. So anyway, that's really about it. But just make sure to include the questions themselves if that was selected. Okay, so then Nicole, just going in the order I see, you ask about 77, which says, Sartre's example of a student who asked him for advice during World War II. Okay, so Jean-Paul Sartre, the existentialist, had a student that came to him seeking advice. What was the student's dilemma? Let me know about that. What was the student's dilemma in the article by Sartre, Existentialism? We had a student had a dilemma. Okay, stay with his mother or fight in the war. That's right, Stephen. He couldn't do both. So this is during World War II, fighting against Nazis. He's French. So he thought I could join the French forces, help defend my country against fascism. But if I do that, I'm leaving my mother behind, who I really love, and who already is kind of sad because my older brother already died in the war. So leaving her would certainly interfere with my ability to take care of her and be a good, loving child of my mother, who's been always good to me. So he wants to leave for the war, but he's also concerned about departing from his mother. He wants to stay with his mother to take care of her, but then he worries about not helping out in the war effort. So he comes to Sartre saying, what's the right choice? So tell me then, based on Sartre's philosophy, what can Mr. Sartre say is the right choice? What's the right choice for anybody, according to existentialism? The notion of correct choice is defined by what in existentialism? So Stephen, you're saying this. He says to choose for himself, and that would be the right choice because you decide what is the correct choice and you develop your own essence. Okay, so the main principle of existentialism is that existence precedes essence. And that implies that each one of us is free to create our own essence, but there's no fact about which essence is like the correct one objectively. Each individual subject subjectively puts forward their own essence based on their own point of view about what the best way to live is. So there's no fact-based objective answer as to like what's the correct choice here. Making whatever choice based on his free will establish that as part of his essence. So if he chooses to fight, then that means he's choosing the essence of being more like the noble fighter. If he chooses to stay, then that means he's choosing the essence of being more like the caring son. But there's no fact about which kind of person he is, since he's free to create it. And therefore, it's almost like a catch-22. You want to do the right thing, but in existentialism, there's no objective fact about what is right, apart from what one determines through their free will. And so this was the point of his example, and it's supposed to highlight features of the philosophy theory of existentialism as applied to a concrete example. Okay, so what else then? So all you need to do are ask questions and supply answers, and we'll just keep going in whatever order you want. Stephen, you asked about 45. Okay. So why did Descartes use the method of doubt? First, I think you should say what is the method of doubt, and then you can go ahead and explain what was the reason that he wanted to use it. So what's the method of doubt? Someone can say that. And Stephen, I noticed you're taking a lot of the labor, but there are 20 people, so everybody should get involved, and you should know these facts. What is the method of doubt? Go ahead, fire away. Just, don't hold back. What is the method of doubt? Let's hear it. Put it out there. Go ahead, hit me with it. Let's go. Method of doubt. Get active. Let's go. It's early in the morning, but there's no time to waste. All right, Brian. Descartes' method of doubt is that one is able to doubt everything perceived by the senses, even math and logic. No, not quite. That's the things that can be doubted, but what's the method? The method. What method says that we ought to be able to doubt those things? The method says to doubt everything that is what? To assume to be false anything and everything that could what? Let's correctly say the method of doubt. What is it? Type it in. Don't worry, it's coming out. So doubt everything absolutely that can be doubted. Sort of clear, but not exactly. To assume to be false everything that can possibly be doubted. Otherwise, what you wrote is circular. Doubt what can be doubted. I mean, that's the same thing. So assume to be false all things that could possibly be doubted. Sloan, so same thing you're doing as Brian. You're just saying what could possibly be doubted. Yes, everything that we perceive with the five senses can be doubted. Math and logic can be doubted, but the method of doubt says because of this, let's assume that they are false. Okay? Assume to be false everything and anything that could possibly be doubted. Why would you do that? Why would somebody want us to do that? What's the reason for using the method of doubt? Just for laughs? Just for games? What's the reason of doing that? He has a specific reason that he says use the method of doubt, because if you do, then you can get to this result. What's the point of doing it? Why use this method? Okay, so Stephen, he believed that certainty must be the foundation of new thought. Well, sorry, yeah, he said that as knowledge has been rapidly advancing in the 17th century, the age of reason, post-Renaissance, that we should make sure that this is all founded on something really solid at the bottom. And so the foundation for this body of knowledge has to be stuff that's totally certain. And he thinks that the way to find out what is totally certain is to employ the method of doubt, which will assume to be false all things that could possibly be doubted. And after that is over with, then the only things left over will be things that are not capable of being doubted. So the method of doubt will like expose to you all the things that could be false. They will then be set aside, and whatever remains, if anything, will be that certainty that you're trying to pursue and set as a foundation for human knowledge. Okay, so it's out of a desire to find certainty, which could thus be used as a base for human knowledge. The method of doubt is done for that reason specifically. Okay, so what's next? And yeah, so Sloan and Brian, another question which is related to that is explain why beliefs that are coming from sense perception are not certain, or why beliefs about math are not certain. And so he talks about the fact that you could be dreaming or whatever, or you could be in a simulation where something's programmed to make you think math is like a certain way, but it isn't. But anyway, though, let's go on. What do you want to have next? It's just dead air. It's just awkward silence. So you got to ask questions. I mean, go ahead and put in some questions so we can keep going. Or I'll ask you questions. How's your day? You guys doing fine? You guys watching the NBA? You looking at the play-in? I'm watching Lakers, hoping that they make it. But anyway, I mean, if you have questions, let's keep going because this is review session time. There's a big list. So, you know the questions on this list that you think you might want help with. So whichever ones you think you'd have trouble answering, now's the time to get the answer. Can we do 59? Sure. So why does Descartes say in the end that the external world exists? If you think back to the sixth meditation of Descartes, where he says, since God is good and he's perfectly benevolent, whatever clear and distinct perceptions you have to be true. Well, why then does he say it's so clear and distinct that the external world exists? He gave 3 different reasons, so let me know about those. Why is it so certain that the external world exists according to Descartes, based on clear and distinct perception? Why is that clear, that there really is an external world? So if you take notes, read, attend, you'll know. Ryan, good. I can control actions of this body, but not others. I feel sensations when this body is given stimuli, but not others. And you cannot remove yourself from this body, unlike others. Yes, that's correct. So you would simply, if this was one of the questions chosen, expand on those points and deliver the information to me. Okay, so Descartes says when you really think about it, it's pretty clear that you do have. Wait a minute, no, sorry, Ryan. Your answer is about a different question. Sorry to say, Ryan, but I spoke too soon. Your answer has to do with the other question, which says how Descartes establishes that you have a body. So you're actually talking about question 60, and we're on 59. They're in a similar part of the notes. So if you can find the prior notes that are just before that, then you would have the right answer. Eric, you've got it. So sorry, Ryan, that was off, but Eric, this is correct. I cannot perceive only that which is favorable. I cannot control what I perceive, and memories are less vivid than current perception is. Yes. So God is omnibenevolent, and he would not deceive us. Since he's perfectly good, that means you can count on clear and distinct perceptions to be true. And he says it is clear and distinct that there's an external world for the reasons that Eric mentioned. Okay, so number one, if the world was a dream, then you could probably just edit it with your thoughts, right? If it was just not objectively real, but this is a big dream that you're having, then don't you think you'd be able to control it? But you can't. So if this was a dream, only good things would be happening, right? There would not be a COVID pandemic. There would not be, like, I don't know, loss, depredation, corruption, fraud, and all the negative things that could happen to you. You know, so if this was a dream you're having, you'd simply edit those things out with your thoughts, but you can't. Another thing is you cannot just make yourself perceive things that are not objectively there. So if I say, watch behind me and see a bird flying around, you can imagine that, but you can't like perceive it as though it was actually there in space. And that is because the external world has an objective content and it's not just something you can make up with your mind. And then another thing is this: original perceptions that you're having in the present moment are way more vivid than when you're thinking back to memories. And that only makes sense according to the theory that when you have the perception in the first place, there's an external object that you're perceiving. And then when you remember it later, you're no longer in the presence of that object. So if I ask you to think right now of a person who's not in your like environment, the thought that you have of them is not as clear as if they were in your face, because when they're in your face, there's an object in front of you that's outside of you. And when you're just thinking of them in your mind, that thing is not present. But if the whole world was a big mental thing, then there wouldn't be any difference between the two cases because you would never really be in the presence of an object, would you? Okay, so there are the three reasons, correct, that Eric has stated. But Ryan, your information is also useful in looking at question 60. Okay, so to those that have seen the list, you can assign the information that Ryan's reporting on to question 60, but they're in a similar point within the lecture notes. Okay, so no problem, thank you. Let's continue going. The faster you are and the more we can get done, the better it is for you and for everybody. But it is up to you to give me the information, and I'll guide you through it once you give me something to meet me halfway and meet in the middle. So what's another question? 85? Sorry. Okay, good. Thanks. Brian, thank you for 85. So the historical account of misfortune from Thomas Nagel. The last article that we read, thank you, Ryan, I got it, thanks. So the last article was Death by Thomas Nagel, and he says that death would be a bad thing because it deprives you of the goods of life, which would be very basic things like perception, thought, desire, just activity. And he says that to understand that this is really a loss, that this is a misfortune, you have to think about misfortune in a historical sense. So he talks about the historical account of misfortune. The historical account of misfortune just says that some things that are unfortunate can only be seen as such when you compare a person's prior state to their current condition. Okay, so like a person who's dead, according to the thought that they don't have any experience because they just don't exist, you could say, well, they're not in pain or they're not miserable because they don't exist. Therefore, there's no harm, right? But Nagel says, no, it is bad because you can compare the fact that they were alive, enjoying the goods of life, with the current situation where they just don't exist at all and they can't enjoy those things. So it is that drop off from having the goods of life to experience and then just having nothing at all, not even existing. That's the misfortune. So he says, some people, they think it's no misfortune because if you just consider the fact that they don't exist, then it's like They're not upset, displeased, in pain, fearful, or anything else. But by comparison to the fact that they used to exist and that they had all these goods of life going on, that's where the misfortune is. He makes a similar point when he talks about a brain injured adult versus a normal infant. The brain injured adult could have cognitive function similar to the level of an infant. And you might think, well, ignorance is bliss. They're pretty much content because they don't even remember the accident and they're being taken care of like a baby. So is that really a misfortune? And he says, yeah, it is, though, because if you look at before the accident, they had like full cognitive function, which they've now lost. So it doesn't matter that they can't be aware of it. It is just a loss. And in the same way, when you're dead, if that's the end, then even though you can't be aware of anything, hey, it's a loss because you used to be alive. So that's it. The historical account of misfortune. I think I gave an example in class too, where I said, if a person has $1 million in their account, like at the end of the year, then you really don't know if that's a good outcome or a misfortune because you'd have to compare it to what they were having before. So if they had $1 billion and now they're reduced to $1 million, that comparison shows a loss. But if they had $100 and now $1 million, that comparison shows an increase. So a given state, like $1 million state, or my brain is like a baby, you don't know whether that's a good or bad thing until you can compare it to the past and see whether it represents a loss or not. Okay, so stuff about the historical account of misfortune and some other comments that help, I think, talk about the other points of Nagel. But you can always return to those if you want more specifics on them. What's next? We can keep going. Still got some good time, so that's nice. What's next? You say, Eric, 65. Okay. Nomological dangler. Okay. This one I think is pretty straightforward, but who knows that? What is a nomological dangler? It's a word that was used by J.J.C. Smart in his article, Sensations and Brain Processes. But what does it mean? Okay, we'll get to that, Claire. What do you think is a nomological dangler, Claire? Okay, so Stephen, something that remains unexplained by physical science. Yes. Now, why did J.J.C. Smart bring that up? Because he says that if dualism was true, okay, like if your consciousness was not entirely reducible to your brain, but was somehow like this mysterious ghost or soul that doesn't even need the body to continue existing, if that was true, then consciousness would be not physical, and it would therefore be something that's a total mystery that science could never explain because it would be outside the realm of anything observable or physical. Now, nomological danglers, things that are just not understood by science, they're not like scientists don't like that. They don't like to concede or suppose that there are some things that we just could never ever physically explain. And so to the extent that there are nomological danglers, the scientific community wants to eliminate them so that they could be explained physically. So the author Smart says, we do not have to agree with dualism and say that consciousness is this mystery that's not physical. Instead, we could just say it's brain processes. And if that's the case, it is within the realm of physics and natural science. If your consciousness is just due to physical neurological signals of the brain, then there's not actually anything supernatural, spiritual, or whatever dualistic about it. So his goal in his paper is to convince us that there's no compelling arguments for dualism, that the identity thesis is true, that sensations are brain processes, and that would eliminate any need to go into dualism and say that consciousness is not physical. Okay, so nomological danglers, things that science can't explain. Is consciousness one of those? Dualists say so, but J.J.C. Smart says that's unnecessary because physicalism explains consciousness better because it's based on the brain, which is physical. Okay, so that's 65. Claire, you say 64. That one asks about the argument from causal closure. Okay, so that's from Daniel Stoljar's paper. And the causal closure argument, it's just something very specific. It has three premises that lead to the conclusion that mental events are physical events. But how does that argument work? So someone will tell me what the various premises are, even if you could just list them one by one. What's the first premise? It's something about causation. It's something about how, what kind of cause everything would have to have. So maybe that'll jog your memory a little, and then you can say what you remember or can retrieve from there. So yeah, it's written out. It's fully spelled out in the book, in the notes. Okay, so there you go, Stephen. Every event which has a cause has a physical cause. That is the first premise. Yes. What that says is that if something happens in this universe, in this world, something physical had to lead to that event. That things can't just happen with no physical basis. So every event that has a cause does have a physical cause. And then there's more, two more premises before the conclusion. So every event that has a cause has a physical one. What else? Okay, Nicole, mental events can cause physical events. So I would interpose the word can in between where you wrote events and cause, because not every physical event is caused by a mental event, but with human beings and other life forms, that just means that thought, like in your head, can lead to your physical behavior. So if I say right now, I'm going to snap my left finger or hand, whatever, then I have done that, and it's a physical event, the hand snapping, but it's because I'm thinking of doing it. So that just means thought can lead to action. That's second premise, okay? And I gave the example of snapping fingers, but it's everything. It's like me talking to you right now. It's you typing into the chat or anything else, putting on your shoes. Okay, so mental events can cause physical events. Now, what about that third one, Nicole? Yeah, so, well, you didn't write the word if, so that is what should precede the whole thing. It's if an event A causes an event B, then, right? So whenever you have the word then, grammatically, logically, the antecedent if has to precede that. So anyway, if an event A causes an event B, then there is no event C which is different from A that also causes B. Correct. So what that means is that for every effect, there's only one cause, not more than one. Okay, now if you summarize all three premises, they imply a conclusion. Can someone write that conclusion of the argument? And then we'll have the whole thing in the chat. So it's good when you're typing these things in the chat because it creates a record that can be referred to later by students that want to review by watching the video playback. So that's why it is also important for you to do your best to try and supply the information. So mental events are physical events, correct. Now, if this was selected, for example, as a question, it would be one thing to just write the verbatim statement of the argument, like you just found notes that say that. But a perfect answer is one where the student shows thought and analysis and is able to report on what the premises mean. So you would say things like, okay, by thinking I can move my body, and that's what the second premise means. Or in the third premise, you would say what that is saying in less technical jargon is that when you have an effect, then there's only one cause for that effect. Okay, now if you put the three pieces together, they imply the conclusion, because according to premise one, everything has a physical cause. According to premise two, your mind can cause mental things, but that must be physical because it caused something. And according to premise three, if the brain is a physical cause of your observed behavior, then there's no room for a second cause that's not physical. And that leaves us with just one option, that mental events are themselves brain activity. Okay, so that would be the information for 64. Next, let's keep going, because that's an argument that physicalism is true. Daniel Stoljar says this is an argument that tries to show you that consciousness is just the brain and there's nothing that's non-physical about it. Okay. Yes, very good. So what's next? We're getting warmed up, I think, and that's good. We're making good progress, but we'll bounce around on whatever questions you think. And then, of course, as I said before, I'm also going to have office hours Friday for those who want to get any additional time. I don't know if anyone will. And I'll try to also make some last-minute office hours available before the final itself for those that want to cram more. I always do that because back when we had face-to-face classes, students would often take advantage of it. When I was in person at like the campus Starbucks, students will come and take notes right before the final. Now that we're all remote, I don't know if there's the same interest, but I'll still have the same policy. But anyway, go ahead and let me know what's next if you have another question. We still got some time. 78, Stephen? Okay. So why did Sartre say that one person creates all of humanity? What does that mean? Someone will tell me what you think it means. Jean-Paul Sartre, existence precedes essence, existentialism. Each one creates their own essence with their free will. So how can that possibly lead to somebody saying this sort of means like you're creating all of humanity? I want to see how you would put that. Because it's like it's the core idea of existentialism in a way. You create yourself, but like you go ahead. I'm going to say less. You just tell me what you think. By creating yourself, how could that possibly be compared to creating all of humanity? It's a metaphor. Obviously, you don't literally create all of humanity, but you do create one person, you. And so how can that be like build a bridge to the next point? You create you. So how does that mean I create all of humanity? It's like a metaphor to express what idea? You're creating all of humanity, you, according to existentialism. So, Eric, by creating your own essence, you also create a model of the good life for all humanity. Yeah, so why are you creating the person that you are in the way that you are? Because you think it's good, right? Now, if you thought that there was a different way of living that was better, then you would have chosen to do that. So, like, are you a Christian, for example? If so, then you believe in Christianity, not just for yourself, but for anybody else too. So when people make the same decisions, you like agree with the decisions. Okay, so if someone chooses the major that you've chosen, I'm sure you wouldn't say that's a bad major. What are you doing? Or if somebody believes in values that you believe in, whether conservative, liberal, or something, then you would align with them. So when you create your own being through your free choices and establish that essence, that's kind of how you think everybody should live. It's like, do it like me, because this is the way to do it. I'm doing it right. And therefore, by creating your own life and your own identity and your own essence, you're creating a paradigm for the good life, period, for everybody. So you create one man, one woman, but that man or woman that you create, you, is like the model. It's the blueprint for how people should live. So that's what it means when he says you create all of humanity. Does that make sense? I hope it does, because that's the best I can explain it. Okay, so what else? Also, just keep this in mind. All these things are from the book, so you should definitely feel comfortable going back to the book. Don't merely use notes taken in class, words spoken by the professor as your sole source of information, because it's all traceable from the book. I don't add anything or take anything away from this book. I have no ideas or thoughts. I'm just like a circuit through which information is flowing from authors out to you. So you can definitely use the book, and you should in doing your own study and review together with the lectures, notes, and your own common sense. But let's keep going. Whatever you have is another question. Brian says 68. All right. To look at 68. Imitation game. Okay. Alan Turing, the creator of digital computer, said that someday machines will have consciousness, that they'll be able to think like we can think. And he said the way of testing when and if that happens is by means of what's called the imitation game. Okay, so the imitation game, aka Turing test. Can you tell me how this game is played? If this was a question chosen, I think the better way of answering it would be to like pretend you're the experimenter setting up the game. So tell me how you set it up and what are the materials and what are the rules, and then that'll help. So imitation game, how does this play? We need to have which players, which rules, etc. Please just let me know. Alan Turing, Turing test. Want to see if machines can think. So we run this game. How does it run? I assume you're typing. I assume that you're writing it right now, and so that there will be an answer in the chat soon. Okay, so Stephen, 3 players. One is a computer, the other is a human, and the other one is also a human. The goal is for the computer to trick the interrogator. Okay, yeah, but you're skipping a lot of details, right? So how do these questions get submitted? Can you see the other people? Etc. Okay, so where are the 2 players physically in comparison to the other one interrogator? We need minute detail. So The answers are written, and the player cannot see the two subjects. Yes. Okay. So what kind of questions are asked? The questions that the interrogator asks to the two interview subjects are in the effort to determine which one of them is a human being and which one is a computer. They don't know in advance which one it is, but they know that there's one of each and that they have to determine it based on the responses they receive. They're not allowed to see the other two players, so they're placed behind a wall. That means that you can't use the visual appearance to make the judgment. You don't hear the voice, and so that makes sure that you're not able to use like timbre or tone of voice to make the judgment, but rather just the content of the information provided in written answers. Okay, so tell me, when does Mr. Turing say that we should give it up and claim that these are thinking machines? What would have to be the result of these tests for us to claim we have a thinking computer that has real consciousness? If what happened? If after the test or game was played, if what? Because the game is played to determine that question, whether computers have thought or not. And what would be the criteria according to which they do have it? You say when computers fool the player into thinking they're human more than 50% of the time. Doesn't need to be more than 50%, but even if it is 50, then that's like just a guessing game and there's no reliability anymore. So if we get to a point where, misidentification is around 50, then we would say it's no longer distinguishable from human interaction. And that means it must be a computer that has consciousness. Okay, so that's the imitation game. Check to see if computers have consciousness by running a test where you have two different separate interviews of an equal length of time. Through the interview questions and answers given, you try to judge who's a computer and who's a human. And if you can't determine the right answer about half of the time in a series of trials, then he would say that's a machine that has real consciousness because no one can tell the difference whether they're really talking to a human or whether they're being catfished by a robot or something. So anyway, let's keep going. What's next? Oh, you had one there, Nicole, 70? Let me see. Yeah, so what did Turing say back to a critic who came at him saying that these machines don't have real consciousness because they're just like imitating the way that people would answer questions, but they don't really have thoughts or feelings inside when they give the answers. What about that objection? Turing had a way of coming back against that objection. Maybe someone remembers. What did Turing say? It is the objection from consciousness. Yes, Stephen. So that's right. How did he reply to this objection from consciousness? So the critic says, this computer that you're talking with, no matter how realistic the answers are, they don't have real thoughts inside. So that can't be actual consciousness. What is the response from Turing? Eric, the only way of determining whether anything has consciousness is observing the behavior. Right. So he says, you'll never be able to prove that anything else is thinking or feeling besides yourself because you cannot escape the first person perspective. And therefore, it's not really a fair criteria, he thinks, to say, until I can feel the computer's thoughts and feelings, then I won't agree that it has consciousness. It's sort of like just basically, how do you know? How do you know it doesn't have thoughts or feelings? It's behaving like it does. And if you really think that there's no verification of this because you're not the subject, then that is a standard that leads into like total skepticism like Descartes, which most people in the real world don't think is serious or take it to be credible. So if the only criteria for determining whether anything has consciousness is a behavioral perspective, then when the behavior matches what conscious beings do, we should think of it as consciousness. Okay, so that's a good question, and there's another answer. If you have more, there's a few minutes. There's not a lot of time left. So if anyone had even like one small one, I guess, we might be able to cram it in before we reach the hour or the class finishing time. What do you think? Anybody? Yeah, it's just kind of it's like a summary kind of question. Yeah, so in terms of 71, a student in the room has asked about it. Turing's views on whether computers, machines could think. He says they could if they pass the Turing test with a 50% success rate someday in the future. So, which he does believe is not just a hypothetically possible thing, but that it really will happen as computers inevitably continue to develop and become more advanced. So His prediction was that by the year 2000, we would have computers that could trick you maybe 25% of the time, but that they would continue to get better and better at it, and that sometime in this 21st century, we will have conscious machines. That's what he thought. Okay. Let's see. I don't know. That's good to get that one in there quickly. Yeah, so I mean, we've made some decent progress, I think, on some of these questions on the list today, and we still have another meeting to come. Okay, Stephen, you asked about 76. Let's see if I could say something quickly about this. Okay, so bad faith. Jean-Paul Sartre, with the existentialist philosophy, says that there's this one thing that if you're an existentialist, you should never engage in, and it's what they call bad faith. What is bad faith? Can you say it in a quick way? It's a thing that a person does when they what? And it's bad, or at least existentialists say it's bad. So what would that be? Bad faith. Sartre doesn't like this. He says, stop it. Don't do that. But what is it? Say that you couldn't control something. Well, kind of, but we could be more detailed. It's whenever a person tries to assign the responsibility for their essence to things they don't have control over. So your essence is just on you. That's the main thing in existentialism. And when you try and say, no, it's not on me. I mean, maybe I'm like this, but it has more to do with my genetics or with my parents, the way they raised me, or maybe with the community I grew up in or the time period. You hear that. People say like, well, I grew up in the 70s and you kids today are way different. We don't agree with you. Or people that are, Gen Z will say the same thing. Like, right, I'm growing up in this era, and so I don't identify with people of other eras. But the thing is, there's no truth to that according to existentialism. You could be whatever you want and nothing is controlling it. So when you say, oh, I'm like this because of my friends or my culture or my community, my parents, my generation, it's not true, none of it. And that's bad faith. So it's bad faith when you try to pin the blame for your essence on outside factors that you can't control. They just kind of try and remind you and insist, no, it's really up to you. Your essence is all you. Own it, embrace it or change it, but it's not something that you can place the shoulder of responsibility on anything else. Is that true? I don't know, but it's an argument, and that's what Sartre's argument was. So with that, I think we've done well, and we've made it through the first of the 2 review sessions. So come back, guys, on Friday, and we'll do another installment. Come ready, come ready with your questions so that we can, do this on a nice rapid pace and get as much covered as possible, because that's best for everybody. And like I say, I refuse to just go through the questions and say, here's the answer to 74, here's the answer to 75. You got to meet me halfway because this is an interactive forum. But that's okay, and we're doing well. So have a good one, guys. Let me know that everything's good, and then I'll close the stream. And then we'll see each other on Friday again, one more time before the final. Okay, thank you, Nina. And thanks to all the rest. Just going to get a chance for a few more responses before I close this. Stephen, Amanda, perfect, guys. Okay, well, good luck on all your other classes and your studying for the finals. I'll be done with your essays soon, and I'll let you know in a few days that they're ready. You can check on your grades. For now, though, have a good one, and take it easy till Friday. Okay, bye-bye.